Hey everyone, it's Brennan. Welcome to my channel and welcome to a very exciting video that I've kind of been putting off filming. I'll talk about that in a second. But this is my 10 favorite books of 2020. So I say I've been putting this off because I was reading Rhythm of War at the end of 2020 and I was really hoping I can get through it to put it on this list, but I didn't. So here we are, still 10 of my favorite books. But first I'm going to mention 5 honorable mentions that I really enjoyed and just wanted to talk about just a little bit. First, I want to talk about Too Late by Colleen Hoover. I talked about this, I think I wrapped it up just last month, maybe in November. It's like a dramatic romance. You're following a college girl who's kind of gotten herself into a bad situation by relying on her boyfriend for money, and he sells drugs, and then she has this thing with a undercover cop that's trying to bust him. I'll link my wrap up when I talked about it more. This book, okay, it was hard to read at some points. It's very, I guess you would say, graphic, and just Colleen Hoover's books are so messy and so dramatic, but I really liked this. I read it probably in 24 hours, couldn't put it down, had to mention it. Also, I'll say, a lot of people don't like this book, so that also made me want to mention that I liked it. Also wanted to mention The Best of Me by David Sedaris. This was a new release from him this year, or last year, I guess. David Sedaris is a humorist. He just kind of writes little snippets and essays from his life. Some of them are fiction, but for the most part, it's just nonfiction about his life. I enjoy them so much. I love his audiobooks. He reads them and he just does such a fantastic job. We had tickets to see him earlier this year. It would have been in April, but obviously that didn't happen. Earlier last year, I keep saying this year. Earlier in 2020, in April, we were supposed to see him. And then in October, we were supposed to see him. None of those happened, but I wanted to mention this. It was so good. I love all of his books. There's not one that I've read that I wouldn't recommend. Also, I think I read this in the same month as Colleen Hoover's book, so linked below. I wanted to mention a nonfiction, and that would be Sacred Cow by Diana Rogers, who is a registered dietitian, and Rob Wolf, who's just been big in like the food and nutrition community, I guess you would say. But this book is about how meat can play an important role in your diet, and it also talks about what I really enjoyed were the environmental impacts from agriculture, and I feel like it just debunks a lot of myths that you hear about meat and your health, and that's my career and profession, so I really enjoyed it. I got through this, I listened to this on audio, and for a nonfiction, I read it really fast. I also wanted to give an honorable mention to Tessa Dare's Girl Meets Duke series. There's 3 books in this series right now, and the 4th book comes out early this year. The first book is The Duchess Deal, the second book is The Governess Game, and the 3rd book is The Wallflower Wager, which honestly was my favorite. I gave all of these 4 or 5 stars. They're historical romances, but they're so funny. They have the perfect level of steam to me, and really enjoyed them. I read them all so fast. Each of these was a 2 or 3 day read. Also, really enjoyed. And then I have to mention Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating by Christina Lauren. And I feel like I have to mention this because this started my spiral down the romance rabbit hole in 2020. It's a cute romance, but it's steamy too. I think this introduced me, or this showed me that, okay, I had not read an adult romance before this book. I read this and it just showed me what there could be in this genre, in this community. I really enjoyed this when I read it. Hazel was so funny. So she's a elementary school teacher. She's so quirky. She's so goofy. So she and her best friend's brother, who she actually kind of had a crush on in college and then didn't know that it was her best friend now in the present's brother, they go on this kind of journey together, setting each other up on blind dates, and then obviously they find out that they have a thing for each other. This was so cute. This was funny. Read this really quickly, and like I said, I have a lot to thank this book for because romance was probably my most read genre in 2020. Okay, and now without further ado, let's get into my top 10 books of the year. And I did do these in order. I tried my best to do these in order. It's hard for me because a lot of them are very different. So at number 10, I put Get Well Soon by Jennifer Wright. And this is a nonfiction book. This is a book about a lot of different plagues, and it starts in like the very early like 60s AD with a plague in Rome. I read this over the summer, so it's been a little bit. And it goes over leprosy and typhoid fever and different influenzas, and it was just so good and also emotional because you kind of follow different people within those time periods, and it was just really good. Very much enjoyed this. This was the first actual review I wrote on Goodreads because when I finished this book, I just felt very compelled to talk about it. Also, it was a book about plagues, and I read it in 2020, so like pretty relatable. Really good. At number 9, I put The Bear and the Nightingale, which I just finished. This is the first book in Catherine Arden's Winter Night trilogy. This is a Russian-inspired young adult fantasy, and we follow our main character. Her name's Vasya, and she's incredible. The story starts when she's not even born, and we follow her in this first book through her growing up. She and her family live in northern Russia in a very secluded but also profitable woodsy town village, and her dad is like the, I don't know what the term is, but he's like the lord-ish of their village, and he remarries after Vasya's mom has died, and her stepmom sees demons, but also Vasya sees these demons as well, but they each react very differently to these spirits, demons that they can see. Vasya is like friends with them. They're like their culture's spirits that protect them, and her stepmother is terrified by them, and because she's so scared all the time, she relies on the new religion a lot, which I believe is like Catholicism, and a new priest comes to their village, and things start to go horribly wrong once he kind of starts preaching fear to the people, and you know, fearing demons and fearing hell and things like that. But oh, this story is so good. The first book was awesome. I've already started the second book. It's so good so far, and it is my number 9 on this list. I should say I listened to it on audio. Audiobook was incredible. It helped me so much in understanding all of these Russian terms and names of characters. Number 8, I have Heart Bones by Colleen Hoover. This was the second Colleen Hoover book I read last year, and it was also a new release from her. I read it when it first came out, and this book, I don't know if you would call it a romance. I say that about a lot of Colleen Hoover's books because they have romance in them, but they also have a pretty good plot, and they're just so dramatic, and like I said, just messy, but in the best way. So in Heart Bones, we follow our main character, Bea, and her mom has just died from a drug overdose, and she goes to live with her dad for a while, but she also never mentions this to anyone. She just calls her dad up and says, hey, can I stay with you for the summer? She has just graduated from high school, and she's just kind of biding her time until she can go to college. And she goes to this Texas beachside, probably like Galveston-ish area. Oh, it has a name, but I can't think of it. I'll insert it below. But there's like an actual place where they are. And it's about Bea finding that she does have a family. She's been so lonely her whole life because her mom, who she's lived with in Kentucky, I should say, she's from Kentucky, which is where I'm from. She has grown up very impoverished, living with a parent who suffers from drug addiction, alcohol addiction, and just being inside Bea's mind and seeing how her upbringing has impacted the way she sees things. I enjoyed so much. She finds a love interest on the beach in Texas, and everyone thinks he's like this rich, wealthy kid, and we maybe find out some more about him. The end of this book was almost painful, but then so satisfying. I really enjoyed this. Read it in a couple days, like I do most Colleen Hoover books. Okay, number 7, don't laugh at me, but it's Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey. I just recently finished this. I read this in 24 hours, probably. This is a romance. Our female character is a birthday clown. Our male character is a early retired Major League Baseball player. I have no interest in either of those things, but this book was hilarious. hilarious. Especially the first half of this book, I was cackling. I was laughing out loud. It was so funny. Also, this book is incredibly steamy. So steamy. This cover, you would not think that it could reach the levels of smut that it reached, but oh man, it was intense. It was so good. So the plot, so our female character Georgie, her older brother's best friend is Travis, who was this very popular Major League Baseball player, and then he had to retire early with an injury, and he's come back to their hometown, which is like an East Coast hometown, I believe. He's having a hard time dealing with his career, and the only thing he's really like loved and had passion for being over early. And Georgie is not about to let him sit and sulk, and this book is her trying to help him just kind of find something else that he has passion for, and to just not sit and waste away his life. And then they develop a relationship. They do some fake dating, which is such a common trope, I feel like, but I loved this. It was so good, and it is number 7 on my list. Number 6 is another Kindle romance, and it is The Guy in the Middle by Kate Stewart. Really, I could put her whole Underdog series on here. I read them all in 2020. The Guy on the Right, The Guy on the Left. I'm mentioning The Guy on the Middle. It was my favorite, and I think it was because our main character, Lance, he's the guy in the middle, he was just so moody, and I love a moody boy. I just love a dark, brooding hero in our books. He boxes. So there's a lot of boxing in this, and our female character, Harper, she is a dancer, and she actually ends up being like a professional New York ballet dancer. And this is their relationship. It's kind of a second chance romance trope, I would say. They have a thing in college. They kind of go from enemies to lovers, and then a second chance trope. It was so good. I have a whole review for this series that I will link below. It's by Kate Stewart. I don't know if I've mentioned that. And yes, The Guy in the Middle was my favorite. I have heard some people say it's their least favorite. It was my favorite. But they're all funny, and they're all super, super steamy. And this is number 6 for me. Okay, and now the first physical book on this list is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This is a science fiction dystopia kind of novel. So this is set in the before, present, and several years after a virus pandemic. I read this in 2020. Very relatable. Okay, this book is not relatable. I should not say that, because this virus kills 99% of the world population. And one of the storylines is 20 years after the virus, and you follow some characters as they travel across kind of the Midwest, like Michigan area, I believe they're in. And they are a traveling troupe that performs Shakespeare. Super interesting. So you follow a perspective with them. You follow a past perspective of a famous actor. You follow the perspective of a paramedic who is like right there when the virus first breaks out, and he's saving this actor. This isn't really a spoiler, but the day that the virus breaks out, this actor has a heart attack on stage. And then in this moment, you follow different characters that were there when that happened. And like I said, there's past, there's present, there's future. I cried once in this book. This is one of the only books that I actually tabbed while I was reading it last year. And my favorite perspective, if you do read this book, I want you to know that my favorite perspective was Clark. One of his scenes toward the very end of the book is what made me cry. And he's the actor, I think his name is Arthur, the actor. He is one of his best friends, but then he also does like some high-level business stuff, and just his story of like, I don't want to say finding himself, but just his story is my favorite. This book, very good. And it is number 5 on my list. Okay, number 4, I have Kill Switch by Penelope Douglas. And like with the Underdog series, I said I would put the whole series up kind of in that spot where I had The Guy in the Middle. Kill Switch was by far my favorite in Penelope Douglas's Devil's Night series. And that is because Damon is another moody, broody bad boy character, and apparently that's my top. And his love interest, Winter, in this book, I don't want to say too much about her because I was surprised going in, and if you pick these books up, I would want you to be surprised going in too. Their relationship is so messy. So messy. This is the Corrupt Hideaway Kill Switch. This is the third book in the series, and I feel like I can't say much about it because I don't want to spoil anything about the characters. I will say, when the series started, I knew I would love Damon because he's almost like the villain. Okay, no, he is the villain in the first couple books, and his redemption for himself was just so satisfying to me. This is a dark adult romance, steamy. You see a theme here, and I loved it. Here it is at number 4 on my list. Number 3, I'm going to put the whole Throne of Glass series. I read Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, Heir of Fire, Empire of Storms. No, there's one in the middle. Queen of Shadows, Empire of Storms, and Tower of Dawn, all in 2020. I have not read the last book, but I've loved this series so much. This is a young adult. Honestly, it probably hinges almost to new adult-ish fantasy series where we follow Selena Sardothian, and she is an assassin. She spent some time being a slave, but now she has a chance to, I don't want to say redeem herself, but come back to society by trying to become the king's champion, which she battles out against some other kind of cutthroat characters, and we learn a lot about this world. There has been some magic, but it's now repressed. We learn about what's going on there. There are witches in this series, which I think is such an amazing addition. There are magical creatures. There are fae beings. There are different continents, different cities, lots of travel and journeying. Just, there's so much going on. There's a lot of romance, a lot of different relationships. If I'm picking a favorite book in the series, I would say Empire of Storms, which I've lent to my dad right now because he's also reading the series. And I say that because I love Elliday. Don't know if that's how you say her name. I'll put it down here because I like to spell things out on this channel, apparently. I really like Elliday. She is... So Selena's hometown was destroyed, and she is a girl who is from Selena's hometown that no one really knows is still alive. I guess I'll leave it at that. She also has a little bit of a physical disability, and I feel like her just dealing with that, and I don't want to say overcoming it, but just, you know, being awesome while still having this physical disability. I love her. Her character is just so good to me. She's so smart. She is so smart. Even though she can't read, and she just does so many cool things, and then her relationship where it's going right now, I really like, and it's because her guy is probably the baddest fae character, as in the most moody and broody. I'm sorry, that's just, how many times can I say that in this video? But Throne of Glass, so good, cannot wait to wrap up the series, but also I'm sad because I don't want to leave this world. We are down to the top 2 books, and at number 2, I have Punk 57 by Penelope Douglas. This is the first Penelope Douglas book I read. I'll link the video where I talk about it more. It was my very first video on my channel. It was my August wrap up. I read this over the summer. It's a romance, and we follow high schoolers. And okay, they're seniors in high school, so it's more new adult, honestly. Okay, it's very new adult. I feel like this just really introduced me to the indie romance world, and we follow our main characters, Misha and Ron. They have been pen pals since the 5th grade, but they've never met in person. They don't even know what each other looks like, and they have a little run-in, and Misha knows who Ron is, but Ron does not recognize Misha. And Ron is not what Misha expected. She's a little shallow. She's got kind of more of a cheerleader attitude than the thoughtful, creative girl that he has been communicating with through letters for most of his life. Then Misha has some personal stuff go on, and then he ends up impersonating a new student at Ron's school for personal reasons, but also to kind of, I don't want to say pick on Ron, but he really doesn't want her to be like she is, because he knows that really she has been this girl that he has been, you know, seeing her true like personality through letters. And it was so good. I couldn't put it down. I'm going to insert a picture of me reading this. I sent this picture to my friends, and I was like, you all have to read this book. And I was feeling like this because this book it was so angsty. Like, it was the angsty kind of steam. Like, oh, it was so good. One of my favorite books. Oh, also, I bought the paperback edition of it. I read it on Kindle. It was free with Prime Reading. Now I own it because it was just so good, and I anticipate rereading it in the future. Speaking of reading books free with Amazon Prime Reading, my favorite book of the year, my #1 pick, was Be Not Far From Me by Mindy McGinnis. This book was so different from any other book that I read this year. One, because I would call it a contemporary. I would call it young adult, and we follow our main character. Her name is Ashley. Early on in the book, okay, first few pages of the book. Also, this book was only 200 and some pages, so probably one of the shortest books I read this year too. We follow Ashley as she has caught her boyfriend cheating on her. They've been camping and she's been drinking, and she runs off into the wilderness. She gets injured and she gets lost, and we follow her as she survives. She's in the Smoky Mountains. She has some survival skills, like she loves to hike, she loves camping, so she has a lot of outdoorsy skills, and she just survives, and we're there for it. And it's graphic, as in like her injuries and the things she has to do to survive. This was so good. This definitely reminded me some of Hatchet, but young adult and with the girl main character. So through this story too, she kind of has some flashbacks of the summer camp that she went to, where she met this other boy. His name's Davy Beat, and just seeing their interactions then, and learning about his story, and seeing how it affects Ashley too, and then just seeing how she grows throughout her experience is so incredible. She has also come from, okay, I say also, relating it back to Heart Bones, she has also come from a single parent household and has grown up very impoverished with her dad. And just seeing how it has affected her personality and made her who she is, I just loved it. It was so good. My favorite book of the year. I really want to buy the hardcover of it just to have to reread. It would be such a quick read. I read it in 24 hours probably too. And now I want to read more Mindy McGinnis, but I think a lot of her books are very different. Like the plots and themes of them are all very different, but I loved it. Loved this. It has inspired me to read more contemporaries. I really want to read more contemporaries. If my favorite book of last year was one, I should read more because I'll probably like them. Hi, it's me from the editing future. I just wanted to mention on a couple of these books that Fix Her Up was a very, for Goodreads standards, low-rated book. It has a 3.59 on Goodreads, which is pretty low, and I absolutely loved it. And for my favorite book, Be Not Far From Me, it has a pretty low rating too. It has a 3.87. Not that those are bad ratings. They're not. They're fine ratings. But they're some of my very favorites that I read. And I just thought that was interesting because I loved them. Gave them 5 stars. But people on Goodreads don't like them as much. I just thought that was interesting and had wanted to mention it. Also, I just want to say, I don't go into a lot of books critically reading them to pick them apart. I go into each book fully anticipating enjoying it, and usually I feel like that lets me enjoy it for the most part. So thank you all for watching. If you can hear crunching, Gizmo is eating some lunch right now. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Please let me know your favorite book of 2020. I would love, love, love to know. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next video.